Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, we will hear from Kentucky's most quoted political expert on all the races that are lining up for next year. It's been a busy week for that. UK political science professor Dr. Stephen Voss will join us later. But first, water. We all need it to live, and Lexington and many surrounding communities have it provided by Kentucky American Water. But where does the water come from, and how does it get treated and get to your home or business? Some older water lines are lead, and Kentucky American has a program to replace those. There are PFAs in the environment, and the water companies dealing with that as well. All of that while trying to keep up with growth and customer expectations. Rob Burton was named the Kentucky American Water President earlier this year. He brings more than 27 years of utility experience to the job, and we welcome you. Thanks for coming, Rob. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Very glad to be here today.
You know, water's about as basic as it gets. You serve more than 540,000 customers in this region. What does it take to get that final product to someone's faucet?
So that's a great question. So the reality is, sometimes folks say, well, water falls from the sky, what does it really take? And is it really that difficult to get water to folks? And the reality is there's a lot of processes the water has to go through. But at its heart, we pump the water through treatment facilities, which use mechanical and chemical means to clean the water and make it safe to drink. And then we pump it through mains throughout the community and also into water towers for storage, and ultimately into folks' homes and businesses and so forth, where they use it for every purpose needed, including drinking and basic sanitation and so forth. But it's a fairly complicated process that we have over 150 professionals here in the state of Kentucky that do a great job every day delivering that service to our customers.
And does it change throughout the year the way you have to treat water? I mean, we hear there are times of the year that the taste may be a little different than others.
Yeah, there's times that things change a little. Obviously, in periods of more rain, there's more runoff into the river systems, which change the treatment just a little bit. But overall, it's a lot of the same treatment, just the water quality can change a little, temperature can change a little, and things of that nature. But the basics of it are essentially the same throughout the year. Really the biggest thing that does impact overall the treatment process is when there is more runoff from heavy rains and things of that nature, when sometimes it takes a little more chemical in the water and things of that nature. But ultimately, the basics of it are very similar. Is
the Kentucky River still the main source of water in central Kentucky?
Yes, it's our primary source. We also have the reservoir here, Jacobson, the reservoir at Jacobson Park, where we pull water from, and there's some of that is spring fed and some of that is some runoff into there. And then obviously the Kentucky River is our primary source at each of our treatment facilities. We have three facilities that actually serve our entire service territory and work together to provide that daily service.
Lots of proposals over the years to have a secondary source and maybe have a pipeline to the Ohio and all of that, but that didn't come to be, right?
That's always a possibility for the future. Right now, for the needs of the communities that we serve and the growth in this area, we definitely are well positioned for what we need to be able to provide on a daily basis. But that is absolutely one of the things that's been looked at as a potential for the future, but nothing in the coming 5, 10, 15 years or things of that nature.
This has been a record rainy year, so probably no concerns this year. But do you feel good about the supply now and in the future? We have had years that we've had droughts.
Yes. We feel very good, and again, we're in varied parts of the river, and plus having the reservoir, which is fed through some natural means as well, gives us some resiliency into where the water sources come from. So we feel like we're well positioned for that. Obviously, in periods of extreme drought, there could eventually at some point be measures we have to take, but we feel confident at this point that we're well positioned to serve our customers.
Infrastructure obviously ages. Some materials that were used years ago are no longer considered acceptable or even safe. Is that why you're replacing some lead lines right now?
Yeah, so all of our systems meet all national standards for lead and water and so forth. Lead and copper in water is actually part of the rule. But there's a heightened sense of what's going on maybe with pipes both in customers' homes and their service lines. Is there lead in those? And there's a national effort underway that every utility has to undertake to identify those lead services. We're asking our customers to work with us to identify those. And then there'll be programs, again, not just with us, but with systems across the country. Many people have probably seen some of those in the news to replace those lead service lines. And it's really a preventative measure. Systems that already have maybe an issue with lead are already required to take steps to treat that or to prevent that. This is about preventing issues and helping make sure that for generations, homes will be safe, businesses will be safe. So it's really about that effort.
A lot of the infrastructure was built in the maybe 40s, 50s, 60s, a long time ago. So you're sort of in the process overall of doing a lot of replacement, right?
Yeah, I mean, here in our core system in Lexington, it started in 1885.
Yeah.
So well over 100 years, and there are mains in the ground that have been there for over 100 years. So it's a constant, need to replace infrastructure as it ages, whether it be a water main, whether it be a fire hydrant, whether it be a treatment facility needs to be upgraded over time. So that's a thing that all utilities are impacted with, and the need to improve, to upgrade that infrastructure, and it's an issue across the entire country. The AF, the American Society of Civil Engineers puts out report cards, and their latest update to their report cards on infrastructure in the water and wastewater sector show basically a C- grade across the country, and a similar C- grade for the state of Kentucky. We feel like our systems are better than that, as our own, and we are committed to, improving, replacing that infrastructure to make sure that we do maintain, a system that is better than that. But that just highlights the need and the concerns facing everyone across the country when it comes to water and wastewater.
How are you dealing with the PFAs, essentially microplastics in the environment that can be in the water?
Yeah, so there's two main constituents. PFAS and PFOA are something that's called forever chemicals, and what that basically means is if you get some of this system into your body, it doesn't really go away, and it can kind of build over time. So many states and the federal EPA have taken steps over the last few years to put regulations in place to essentially say, here's a level that is considered where you should do further treatment and take further efforts to remove that. There's lots of work being done with the actual folks who manufacture those chemicals and so forth. But as a treatment facility, it's our job to make sure our customers are protected. If it's found in the drinking water, it needs to meet those regulations. I can report that at this point, all 3 of our treatment facilities do not have PFAS at a level in the source water side that requires treatment. Actually, in the majority of the sources, it does not even show up in testing. So the reality is our customers are right now protected, from the danger of those chemicals. But we, along with other utilities, have to be on the lookout for those, because that could change over time. And there's always new emerging contaminants that come out that can be found that, maybe a chemical that was, created new 10, 15 years ago, we may find out now has an issue. So there's always an ongoing effort to look for what is showing up in source waters and seeing, are they safe, are they not safe? And that's a process the EPA goes through on a continual basis to protect customers who ultimately consume that water.
Many water companies have for many years added fluoride to the water. That has recently been a source of some controversy and lawmaking. Where does that stand?
So for us here in the state of Kentucky, we contribute fluoride to the drinking water now, according to state standards and federal EPA standards. The majority of our systems across the country within American Water do the same. And ultimately, we view that as a community decision and or a state requirement decision. There's actually a couple of states looking at potentially making it where it can't be put into water, and there's a couple of states looking at making it where it has to be put in the water. So there's different thoughts on this one. But ultimately, we initially started putting fluoride in drinking water, essentially at request of the communities we serve, according to the science. And we meet all the requirements of, like I say, the state and federal EPA when it comes to that. But there's a lot of strong opinions around fluoride, and that's a piece that we as your water provider, we don't want to be the one making that decision. So we follow essentially what is either the law or the community request, if you will, when it comes to fluoride.
Can you differentiate, though, if different communities make different decisions in terms of the water going in?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of system. So specific to ours, since ours serve multiple communities, that would require a coalition of those communities to have that conversation. If you have a system that serves just one community, that's a much easier decision to make because that community can work with you on that. But specific to the entire water sector, it's really better if those are decisions made, by citizens, by consumers. But for a system such as ours, which does serve multiple, it would take conversations, with multiple communities and community leaders and community advocates to make a decision. Do we make a change? Obviously, the state or the federal government can make a regulation that would change that, but that's where that currently sits.
All right, so you have a lot going on. It is always up to the Public Service Commission to decide if rate hikes are reasonable. Occasionally you make those requests. Do you feel that customers do get their water at a reasonable price given what you face in terms of requirements and trying to keep your system updated?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So I appreciate that question, and yes, ultimately, I absolutely think that the water service we provide is affordable. The Public Service Commission is tasked with balancing two very important items, which is keeping rates low for customers, customer affordability, but also keeping utilities healthy. Because at the end of the day, a resilient and capable utility is a major benefit to its community. If that same utility is not fully capable, is not allowed to do the type of infrastructure investments they need to do, then it's not going to be as beneficial to that community. And the PSC is tasked with balancing that, which is an extremely important task. But if you think about water service, for between 1 to 2 cents a gallon, customers are delivered essentially all the water they need into their homes. Average customer uses around 100 to a little over 100 gallons of water a day, and that's being delivered to them at a little over a penny a gallon. So a little over $1 a day, if you will, for that water coming to their home. And, if you think about it just for the pure drinking water side, if you've ever bought a bottle of water, it costs a little more than a penny for the bottle. You can spend, many, many times that amount. Just for a single bottle of water can cost anywhere from $1 to $3 or $4, and a gallon of water can cost way more than that. So we do feel it's very much a true value to customers. And it's often their lowest utility bill that they pay is their water service and or wastewater service. But again, we think we partner well with not only the Public Service Commission, but also our customers in ensuring they get the service they need and deserve at an affordable price.
Rob Burton with Kentucky American Water, thanks for coming.
I appreciate it, sir.
Get a drink of water, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. And we'll be back in just a moment on Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll be visiting with UK professor Dr. Stephen Voss. Talk some politics in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. It's suddenly a lively time in Kentucky politics. Governor Andy Beshear is in the key Democratic primary state of South Carolina, fueling suspicion that he will run for president in 2028. 3 Republicans are fighting it out for a chance at Senator Mitch McConnell's seat that's opening up for the first time since 1984. And Congressman Andy Barr being in that race means his 6th district seat is up for grabs. That has set off a scramble in both parties. Dr. Stephen Voss is Kentucky's most quoted political expert, and he teaches politics at the University of Kentucky. Welcome, Dr. Voss. Good to see you as always.
Good to be here, Bill.
So it is an interesting time, as we say. Governor Beshear has made several stops in South Carolina this week. It was the first to hold a Democratic presidential primary in 24. It is likely that could happen again in 28. Is this how you run for president without saying you're running for president?
This is very much how you test the waters for running for president. Now, a lot of people who will do those tours end up not announcing. And they're trying to see what kind of money they can raise, what kind of attention they can get from the public if they rise in the polls. I wouldn't bet the house that Andy Beshear will end up being a presidential candidate, but he's doing all the things that suggests he's queuing up so that he can.
He's obviously trying to position himself as a healer. Does that landscape and that issue lend itself to a potential Beshear candidacy in your view?
Sure. Right now, Democrats are in the wilderness, and when they are, they start looking for the sort of candidate who can bring in voters that don't regularly vote for their party. Andy Beshear is the sort of candidate that the Democrats should be looking at so that they can get out of the wilderness and get back into power. Now, whether he can emerge or one of the many other dark horse candidates that are trying to get the name recognition right now, or the ones who emerge, who can say?
Do you see any parallels to where he is and where some of the presidential races may have been, in years past? I know Jimmy Carter, for instance, was polling very low a couple of years before the 1976 election that he won.
In a sense, I think Beshear is trying to do what Jimmy Carter did in the 70s, which is focus on those early deciding states, get that name recognition by having those boots on the ground very early. But it's a very different political world than it was in the 70s. And trying to come from nowhere by focusing on one or two states, it's gotten harder as those races have become more and more expensive.
How long until he would likely have to make a decision about whether or not to get in that race?
Well, you can always get out at any time. We have what we call in political science the winnowing process. You get a large number of maybe candidates, and they winnow down all through the process through Super Tuesday, the big clash, and that's usually when you're left with very few. Beshear doesn't have to decide. You know, he can do the fundraising, stay on the national circuit. If he decides to run, great. If he doesn't, he's built up his clout, his name recognition for other things.
Is it easier if you're better known across the country? Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Governor Newsom of California, people who have been on the national stage for a time.
Yeah, there's a degree to which, like any other product, people are more likely to buy a politician they've heard of. And they need to think you're serious before they then make the next step of deciding if you're the product they want to purchase. So yeah, first step, Andy Beshear's got to become more of a household name than he is, but he's had some luck. George Will wrote about him, for example, and other people have listed him as one of the possible candidates for the election. That name recognition is growing slowly.
There could be others with Kentucky ties in that 28 race. Obviously, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, is seen as the GOP front runner at this time. Could Senator Rand Paul also be trying to clear a lane for a potential candidacy? Again, he ran in 2016.
Yeah, if anything, I might put my stock in Paul's candidacy before Vance's. It is hard to follow up as a vice president and run for president. We saw Joe Biden not be able to do it, right? He had to come back later to do it. Vice presidents don't have a good record. They have all the baggage of the administration with none of the promise for change or the future. After a few years of Trump, people may be looking for change. They may be asking who's going to be the next face, who's going to redefine the Republican Party. Rand Paul's positioned himself to be that alternative, to be that change for the GOP.
Are you watching his moves? I mean, does he seem to be telegraphing that may be where he's going?
Rand Paul seemed as though he was running for president almost soon as he first sat in that Senate seat. I'm sure he's watching for the opportunity, but that, again, does not mean he actually will pull the trigger on a race.
Kentucky's U.S. Senate race is just fascinating because Mitch McConnell won't be on the ballot for the first time since 1984. And each of the Republican candidates has ties to McConnell, but yet they're all trying to distance themselves from a man who has won 7 straight U.S. Senate elections here in Kentucky.
Yeah, that's such a hard balancing act. On the one hand, obviously the Republican Party has moved. It's not the Reagan-Bush era GOP of Mitch McConnell, so you have to distance yourself from him some. On the other hand, he's helped build the GOP in Kentucky. There are a lot of people here with good loyalty to Mitch McConnell, and distance yourself too much, seem as though you're being too critical and you worry about offending those people. So finding that right balance between distancing from McConnell and not offending the McConnell camp, not easy to find.
But they're all three kind of doing that, right?
But they're all seeking that equilibrium.
They want the Trump endorsement.
Well, now the Trump endorsement is valuable. Not as valuable, I think, as people believe, because Trump likes to pick winners. He's strategic in who he endorses. But still, that's name recognition for Nate Morris if he gets it, name recognition statewide for Andy Barr if he gets the Trump endorsement. It's valuable.
Is there a chance the president does not endorse?
That would be the safest thing. If he's being strategic, staying out of this race would be the way to go. But Trump often can't resist trying to build a protege or build a link to somebody who will owe him later.
Do the fundraising numbers give you any guidance about where this race could be headed? Barr has a significant campaign war chest, $6 million.
He does. I think the important thing to keep in mind, though, is that Cameron's funding for where he is in the Senate race is not bad. It's actually pretty good by national standards right now for a race that's well over a year from now. What stands out is not Cameron's number being lower, it's Barr's number being so high. I mean, Barr's got a war chest that a Senate incumbent, somebody who already has the job normally, would bring into a race, not what somebody seeking the job normally would have. Barr's got a ton of money, But we've seen in the past, money does not buy an election. You have to use it well. You have to use it to build name recognition. You have to use it to persuade people to vote for you. That's not guaranteed.
What is Nate Morris's lane in this race?
Well, right now what we've seen is Nate Morris is trying to be the Trump candidate. He's saying the other two are McConnell's boys. If you really want a Trump-style candidate, you need to vote for me, a businessman, Nate Morris. That's the branding.
And it appears they're going to go after him, both Cameron and Barr, right?
Well, and they may not have to do it. They may be able to have outsiders who don't want a Trump-style candidate, yet another one in the Senate. Maybe we'll do the negative advertising against Nate Morris and let Cameron, let Barr keep their hands mostly clean.
Dr. Voss, those outside sources are not supposed to coordinate with campaigns, and yet so often their messaging is exactly what a candidate would want to have said.
Yeah, coordination means I want you to spend here at this time, as part of an extension of the campaign strategy. It doesn't take a genius, though, to see what the messaging is of the candidate you support and sort of echo it for them. That's not coordination, just listening and trying to figure out what will help them.
The 6th District U.S. House race is open because Barr is in the Senate race, and now there are several candidates, 3 candidates, I think, on each side in the race. New candidates emerged this week, Republican Ralph Alvarado and Democrat Zach Dembo. Now 3 candidates each, as we said. Republican Representative Ryan Dotson and Deanna Gordon are in. Democrat Sherilyn Stevenson and David Kloiber in the running. What do you see in those races?
We heard when this district was redrawn that it had been redrawn to be completely biased toward the Republicans. We're seeing now that people did not really believe that. There's not a lot of territory nationwide that both Democrats and Republicans have a viable chance of winning. This is one of those districts in central Kentucky, and what we're seeing is a lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans queuing up because they both think their party has a chance here.
Is this a red or purple district?
It's red tilted. It's a purple with a more of a shade of red, but this will be a good year for Democrats. A Republican president, Republicans running Congress. You expect Democrats to do better than usual. This is the kind of place where the Democrats could hope to flip a district that tilts slightly against them.
What do you make of the 4th District, where Thomas Massie is seeking re-election and President Trump's team promises to defeat him in a primary?
This is a great time for Thomas Massie to be facing a Trump-style challenge. The Epstein files, which I know we don't have time to get into, the controversy over the Epstein files has formed a fissure on the right, a fissure in the MAGA camp. And Thomas Massie has now been able to get publicity as someone pushing for the release of the Epstein files contrary to the Trump administration. It's a chance for Massie to win the hearts and minds of those conservative voters in northern Kentucky.
Senator Paul endorsed Massie. Was that any surprise to you?
Not really. If you look at the voting records of Massie and Paul in Congress, they look fairly similar. They're very, very conservative on economic issues, on size of government issues, but they're fairly moderate on more social and cultural things, such as prison reform or what happens to people once they've served their time and they're on parole. They tend to look fairly moderate on those sorts of social and cultural issues.
We watch the registration numbers here in Kentucky, and independent registration just keeps surging. Now 11% of the electorate statewide. I think it's higher than that in the 6th District. When does that become a factor that partisan candidates cannot ignore?
You don't want to put too much stock in those independents. What we find from research is that most independents tilt. They lean either toward the Republicans or toward the Democrats, and they're pretty loyal in election after election, even though they claim to be independent. Still, there are a lot of voters in this state, despite the fact that being an independent limits you, who are so unhappy with both parties that they don't want to register with either. And those are votes that are up for grabs for either party. I think one reason we're seeing the Democrats make a real play for both the 6th District and the Senate race is because they sense they can win when they have the right matchup.
If you had 11 or 12% of the vote, though, that could be quite a sway in a very close congressional race, right?
Yeah, the problem with the independents is they're not all the same. They believe things all over the place, so getting them all to move together is pretty tough.
But if you're a candidate, how do you figure that out? You're just looking at that big number. Statewide, it's like almost 350,000 voters.
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough, right? If you're the Democrats, you might think, all these independents for us to win, but then you go find out one reason they're independent is they think the Republicans are too moderate. They think even the Republicans are too much like Democrats. They won't be voting for a Democrat.
Elon Musk wants to start a third party, says he will put some money behind it. What are the barriers to that?
Well, the biggest barrier, there are lots, but the biggest barrier is that our system, because one candidate gets the win, right, in any place, in a congressional district, a Senate district, presidential, electoral college votes, because it's the first past the post, voters are really pressured into picking either the Democrat or the Republican who's closest to them. Third parties, even someone like Ross Perot, who in the 90s got a lot of support, they get nothing in the Electoral College, for example. That just the system favors having two and only two parties. The one thing that you could do is if you could be regionally strong. In our system, if you're like overwhelmingly a party in the South, overwhelmingly a party in the Northeast, you can have some success as a third party.
Few seconds left. What are you going to be watching the next few weeks?
With things so crazy, I'm going to be waiting to see what shows up in the morning on Twitter, because you just never know in this system.
It's a fluid time, isn't it?
We are living, as you said at the beginning, in interesting times.
Yeah. Dr. Voss, thank you as always. Always a good conversation. We appreciate it. Everybody stay with us. We'll wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers in just a moment. We do want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. In addition to this program's run at 10 a.m. on the CW Lexington and 11:30 on WKYT, we now stream it on Friday nights. A quick preview of the show. That is Kentucky Newsmakers. Thank you for joining us. Have a good week ahead.